Season 1 of Dragonflight is about to begin, but the next patch is already here to distract us. Yay! Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly. It's 15 or so minutes of finely processed copium. You can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more WoW coverage, and catching me live wherever I'm streaming. You see enough of this vision of perfection, so let's kick things off with a showcase of all the new Tier 2 gear that's going to come out in the 11.0.5 patch while I mouth off with coverage. It sure looks like we can expect a similar patch cadence to Dragonflight. At the start of that expansion, it was only a few days before Season 1 began when its patch 10.0.5 was announced, with things like the Trading Post, Heritage Armor, Quest lines, and more. Season 1 of the War Within hasn't even started yet, and yet, here we are, ready to cover another patch after a big reveal complete with a video presentation, behind-the-scenes footage, and pretty visuals, of course, putting their best foot forward with remakes of the classic Tier 2 sets. The highlight of the upcoming 11.05 is the WoW Anniversary event, which is, it's too big to fit in just a weeks-long event. Instead, it's going to be a 2-month-long celebration, basically until patch 11.0.7, assuming that there is one, with whimsical random distractions and trips down memory lane, huge updates to timewalking, including adding Classic Era as a permanent rotation. So 11.05 might be something you want to be here for, but it's not without the sweeping class changes we've come to get kind of used to since Dragonflight. It sort of reveals Blizzard's philosophy here. When they have big sweeping changes to drop, they're going to drop them as early as the first third of a season, but not so soon that it'll disrupt the craziness of the very first season. Let's take a closer look at Blackrock Depths as a raid. It's going to have 8 bosses, and it'll drop gear equal to that of the Narubar raid to the same item level of the current season. It's going to come in Raid Finder, Normal, and Heroic difficulty, and so far, the entire loot table is warbound, as in what you get is tradable across the account until a character puts on the gear. This is going to be pretty wild because it'll 100% encourage folks to run this raid over and over, at least on Raid Finder with every character under the sun, to later trade this gear around and give their alts a very nice boost in item level. The loot tables have also been expanded and still feature some crazy effects on the likes of weapons, like there's a ring too, and additional trinkets and updates to old ones that are bound to get nerfed unless we're like totally okay with this double mana pool trinket being useful for possibly the whole expansion. Again, it's a good thing that we can take a bunch of alts to farm up gear and funnel it to our mains if we wish, and we'd be well into the season at this point. Like, I don't think it'd be a big deal if 2 raids have these competing loot tables. I mean, at this point, let's just have fun with the gear, right? The dungeon bosses and loot tables seem more straightforward by comparison. The items actually don't seem to be done quite yet, and Dire Maul appears to be split into 3 parts and not just 2 as it was originally announced, so we'll see how things develop. Another small but not so small change coming to 11.05 include doing away with those pesky restrictions from transmog unlocks, which we'd find in the likes of like Vanilla and Legion raids. So if you want to, you can do what I did before the 11.0 patch, which was to go on like a dumb farming spree of old content while not picking up the gear, just let it go into the mailbox, and then after the patch drops, open up your mail and use auto vendor add-ons to quickly go through all those new unlocks. Next week I want to have another add-on guide out to help us along with some specific activities during Season 1, so stay tuned for that, and more coverage as we get closer to the upcoming patch. It's only been a little while, but I think we ought to take a step back as we wrap up this preseason and go over how things went, because this preseason was unlike any that we've had before. First came early access with limited gearing, but a head start to the player economy. The actual preseason included adventure level drops and 1 crafting spark, which allowed players to have the equivalent of, I guess, max level veteran gear. On top of that, we had a few actual veteran level pieces with some rep farming, letting us inch closer to champion, which is normal raid gear. Unlike previous expansions, regular mythic dungeons were not available, just heroics for adventure level gear, and from that, we kind of got to see what happens when very highly motivated and gear-minded players had just heroics as their only avenue of gameplay, which was to, notably slam one of the dungeons and leave immediately after the first boss if the trinket that they want didn't drop. Never mind that it's the preseason and that gear would be replaced pretty fast, it's just kind of what we get. I got a lot of feedback over the past few weeks, also from the higher skill band of players, that there wasn't enough tough content during the preseason to, like flex their classes, or at the very least really try out hero talent in a practical setting. Like all they had were target dummies. If there's a culprit behind why progression felt the way it is now, it's going to be the upgrade system, with this being the first time with launching an expansion with it. If you think about it, after upgrades, the gear from heroic dungeons and even the blue crafted gear is equal to raid finder drops from the previous expansion, putting us way ahead the power curve of outdoor content in only like a week or so. It's small potatoes. Again, this is the preseason and we can't cover every need, but in this case, I have some ideas and suggestions for later on, as in a couple of years from now. One would be like to, go ahead and release Mythic Zeros, but still just give adventurer gear, the same as heroic dungeons. So it's going to mean that most people aren't going to do them, but many can still opt to do them for maybe some practice. And, maybe it would give Blizzard a chance to get some like last minute feedback before the season starts. Another possible idea, maybe increase the health of rare and rare elite mobs in the outdoor world, something like 30 to 40%. Now, okay, maybe it's me, but I feel like the elite rares were still a little bit too fast to kill, even when I'm soloing, even when I'm in a tank spec. And frankly, I had a harder time killing individual, like non-rare elites, like bees, whenever I ran into those. If outdoor rare elites had a little bit more life, maybe not damage, but at least more life, it would give a chance for these players and other players to get a full cooldown rotation and feel the results of, whatever their choices were. Back to the preseason though, there were a few surprises and also some right calls that we made. For example, I didn't expect people to care so much about upgrading their crafted blues to 590s. Now maybe it's because WoW had pointed out that it was a way to bypass using a few crests and valor stones during the season. Maybe the community is just a lot more rich than I thought. Gathering is in fact still winning, predictably not as much as the first few days, but zipping around finding things like null stones and profane tinder boxes, like rare materials that are needed for critical recipes, it makes for good and near instant money. I didn't think finishing materials that give those skill bonuses for crafts were going to be so abundant, and more importantly, I didn't realize they were tradable, meaning that it's much easier to create the best versions of crafts without concentration. All it takes is, offsetting that cost to the client. I told you that dust or enchanting dust will be a very hot commodity. I pointed out thaumaturgy would be this weird but very profitable equalizer of basic materials. I told you it would be easier to learn and master a profession, and okay, maybe not, it didn't work out, whatever. I appreciate the folks though who dropped in on stream and in the comments to let me know that the guides that I made did help, so I'm really glad that all that work paid off. Now let's look forward to the actual season, and I'll have more detailed breakdowns this coming Monday. Again, because this is the first season, Blizzard's trying out something new with this staged rollout. This coming week, we'll see the raid in normal and heroic versions, with the very first wing of Raid Finder as well. The weekly caches will award veteran gear up from adventurer. Heroic dungeons are going to give somewhat better gear. We're going to see Mythic Zero dungeons, but not Mythic Plus. Rated PvP and delves are going to be fully unleashed though. We're not going to get a Great Vault this week, but next week and the activities that we do in this coming week, they should give credit towards the Great Vault the following week. So in theory, the best things that we'll get from this upcoming initial vault is going to be hero gear. The only gilded crests, those are going to be the best ones. They're only going to come from tearing down the last two bosses of the heroic raid. And that part doesn't mean all that much because of season caps. It's going to be quickly controlled, but it's worth pointing out. We should also have another half spark, meaning a second full spark for crafted gear. Now obviously Mythic Plus World isn't all that happy about this. Like I said earlier, maybe Mythic Plus also could have been open in a limited basis, but maybe not for gearing, just for practice, just to get some of the edge off, I guess. We should also consider this pattern won't repeat itself in later seasons, and we should expect a similar schedule to Dragonflights, like with a 1 week preseason where everything but Mythic Plus and Mythic Raids, or Mythic Plus and Raids are open, and then when the season starts, we get it all. We get Mythic Plus and Mythic Raids, PvP, all of it. Speaking of, the race to World First will begin, although not for being the first to clear the upcoming raid necessarily, but to obtain this jewel crafting recipe to create an item that lets us add up to 2 sockets to accessories, 6 slots in all. Whoever gets this first is going to be filthy freaking rich, and the jewel crafter who gets this first is going to make millions in just a few hours. Like, they won't be crafting fast enough to sell. The WoW economy is going to get energized 1 week after the next as players obtain like more sparks and they replace their gear and they need new gems and enchants, and they begin consuming the potions and flasks and food that we've made while leveling up our professions and want more and in better qualities. I'd like to get your guys' take on how the preseason went for you, or I guess how are you liking the way the War Within is ramping up so far? I've noticed that there are some pretty firm takes from what I'm going to identify as the people who do group content versus the people who do solo content, although really most of us are like, somewhere in between. I brought up one side a few times today with some folks being bored, that there's not enough to do, whether it's, difficult content or just something to grind away at, like, I don't know, artifact power or something. And on the other side, folks are having a total vibe. They're, taking the time leveling, they're learning more about the world of Kaz Algar, they're relearning it as an Earthen, making a new character. Like, and I'm in a different spot myself too. I'm having mostly focus on gold making and profession development, but I'm still, fairly geared. I have an item level of like 580 or something like that with the currencies to spend on upgrades, but I'm going to hold off until next week for some new gear that'll hopefully maybe save me some crests and valor stones. But overall, I'm liking this. Like, I've given myself obligations in game, but none of them are being forced on me, right? Season 1 will be very interesting as we observe how players react to delves being a way to obtain decent gear. It's going to be maybe a stepping stone for some, a new kind of endgame for others, or maybe a total endgame replacement for others still. How much will delves peel away from the likes of Mythic Plus and the raid participation? We're going to find out soon, but for now, that's the show. And I want to thank those of you who've been joining me on stream either on Twitch or YouTube. It's great to be able to connect with so many folks who've been like watching these videos for a while, but never had a chance to get to know how bad I am live. And I also got to mention our awesome patrons, including newcomer William. Thank you very much. And we can't forget about you folks, the algorithm squad, for making it to the end. Y'all are the best, of course. Next week is going to be packed with coverage and helpful tips, so stay tuned. Like this video, subscribe for more coverage, and catch me wherever I'm live, whenever. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.